Hello, learners. Welcome to this discussion on Module 14, that is Gendered Genres of your course on Gender and Media. In this video, we shall explore the intersection of media studies with the various storytelling traditions, which shape and reflect societal expectations of gender to a great extent. Before we begin, let us first reflect. Why do we expect certain types of characters, narratives, or themes in a romantic comedy versus an action thriller? It may be in any medium like books, movies, or TV shows. How do these expectations reinforce or challenge gender norms? Through this video, we shall explore these questions by looking at how different media genres construct gender and how creators subvert these conventions to challenge dominant narratives. The objectives of this video are to contextualize gender and genre in media, to discuss the gender-genre interface in media, to relate how different media genres construct gender, and to reflect how dominant conventions of gender are challenged through media, and lastly, to understand the role of audience in gendered genre conventions. So now let us look at what is gender in media studies. It is essential for us to understand the concept of gender in media. So how does media construct gender? You might recall Judith Butler's influential work Gender Trouble, where she argues that, I quote, "Gender is not something one is, it is something one does," unquote. So this notion challenges the biological determinism often found in mainstream media and instead posits gender as a performative act shaped by societal norms and media representations. When you consider advertisements, have you noticed how they reinforce traditional gender roles? Cleaning product ads often show women in domestic roles, while perfume ads depict hyper-masculine men. These images are not neutral. They teach us how to do gender through repetitive cultural messages. Now let's discuss what is genre. Genres are categories that define the style, form, and content of a creative work. They serve as a guidepost for readers, viewers, and writers, signaling what kind of experience to expect. A genre is, in fact, more than just a category, a set of storytelling conventions that guide the expectations of the audience. Film scholar Steve Neill, in his book Genre and Hollywood, suggests that genres function through repetition and variation, meaning that while stories follow familiar patterns, they also evolve over time. Look at the following quote: "Genres are not static. They are constantly evolving, mixing, and hybridizing," unquote. Additionally, Neill emphasizes that genres are defined by both repetition and variation. He pointed that genres are instances of repetition and difference. They depend on the existence of a corpus of texts, and they depend on the existence of a set of expectations, conventions, and norms. This means that while genres rely on familiar patterns and conventions, they must also introduce novelty to remain engaging and relevant. For example, horror films typically include airy music, dark settings, and suspenseful storytelling. However, films like Get Out subvert this formula by adding racial commentary, thus pushing the boundaries of the horror genre. But what happens when we introduce gender into the genre equation? This brings us to our next segment for discussion, that is the gender-genre interface in media. Let us briefly examine how different genres reinforce gender norms. Laura Mulvey, a feminist film theorist, introduced the concept of the male gaze in the article titled Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, where she explained that many mainstream films are designed from a male perspective, turning female characters into objects of visual pleasure rather than active participants. I quote, "In a world ordered by sexual imbalance, pleasure in looking has been split between active male and passive female. The determining male gaze projects its fantasy onto the female figure, which is styled accordingly. In cinema, women are mere symbols and not subjects," argues Mulvey. To substantiate her point, we can consider romantic comedies as example, which often center on heterosexual love stories, where women portrayed as emotional and men are portrayed as reluctant yet charming leads. On the other hand, action films typically feature male protagonists who use strength and aggression to solve problems. Women, if included, are often side characters or just love interests. The intersection of gender and genre raises a few key questions. Are certain genres gendered? And if so, who decides these categories? Generally, romance novels are often dismissed as women's fiction, while detective thrillers are perceived as masculine. Yet, authors like Agatha Christie challenged this binary by dominating a traditionally male genre. As Carol Clover notes, in Men, Women and Chainsaws, horror films often present the final girl trope, a female character who survives the killer's attack through resilience and intelligence. Unquote. So this suggests that gender roles in genre narratives are not static but constantly evolving. In fact, it challenges Mulvey's theory of the male gaze by offering a hybrid figure of identification. In contemporary times, filmmakers and writers constantly challenge these norms. For example, Mad Max Fury Road. This film redefines the action film by making Furiosa, a woman, the central figure, while James Bond franchise in recent years have introduced stronger female leads. So dear learners, by now you must have acquired an understanding of how gender and genre are interwoven as far as media representation is concerned. Let us now look at depth the interconnection between gender and genre in film, television, literature, digital media and interactive media. Number 1. Gender and genre in cinema. I quote, "Genres are ideological tools. They don't just reflect gender norms, they teach audiences how to perform them." So from the damsels in distress as depicted in movies previously to the rise of female action heroes, cinema has long been a battleground for gender representation. But why are certain genres coded as masculine or feminine? And how do these conventions reinforce or challenge real-world power dynamics? In this section, we shall explore the intersection of gender and genre in film. Firstly, let us throw light on a genre like romantic comedies or rom-coms, which are casually often labeled as women's films. This kind of genre has been historically targeting female audiences by taking as its core emotional labor, domesticity, and heterosexual romance. For instance, in Pretty Women, Julia Roberts' character is literally saved by a wealthy man, reinforcing patriarchal fantasies. Significantly, action movies are marketed towards men. Why? Because such kind of films prioritize physical prowess, violence, and male heroism. As Yvonne Tasker argues, action genres construct masculinity as a spectacle of the body under pressure. To this, May be added what Laura Mulvey famously argues in Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, that mainstream cinema adopts the male gaze, where women are the bearers of meaning and not the makers of meaning. So, this gaze objectifies female characters, reinforcing male dominance in storytelling. We can take the James Bond franchise as an example. Bond's masculinity is defined through action, power, and control, while female characters serve as love interests or plot devices. However, the trend is facing challenge in the contemporary times, as many films have subverted the traditional gender roles. The emerging hybrid genres, queer narratives, etc., are reinforcing both filmmakers and audience to relook at the ways gender has been represented in cinema so far. As far as subversion and resistance are concerned, feminist and queer filmmakers have long resisted gendered genre conventions. Catherine Bigelow, the first woman to win an Oscar for Best Director, directed the film The Hurt Locker. It's a war film that defies the expectation that men direct such genres. Similarly, films like Portrait of a Lady on Fire reject the male gaze by presenting female desire through a female-centric perspective. Number 2. Gender and genre in television. Television has long been a reflection of gender norms as perceived by the society, while also an arena where such notions are challenged. So, from the feminine melodrama of soap operas, which are marketed towards women and often focus on emotional drama and interpersonal relationships, to the masculine logic of crime procedurals with a focus on logic and reason, TV genres have historically been as gendered as the audiences they target. If we take example of the Indian reality TV show Bigg Boss, we find that female contestants are often judged for being too emotional or too aggressive, while men are praised for the same traits. Or let us take the example of a TV show like Nagin, which has a female protagonist. It is seen that such shows even today frame women's power as mystical or dangerous with the trope of supernaturalism. So, despite these double standards, today many TV shows are breaking these binaries and stereotypes. As in films, television has also witnessed the rise of the hybrid mode of storytelling with the inclusion of anti-heroines or genre-defying characters. With the explosion of the streaming platforms and demand of global stories, television's gendered cages are slowly weakening. Next, let us come to the point: gender and genre in literature and popular fiction. Literature has long categorized genres along gender lines. The romance genre, often dismissed as light reading, has been reclaimed by feminist scholars as a space of female agency. Janice Redway, in Reading the Romance, noted, I quote, "Women's reading practices are complex negotiations with patriarchal norms. On the other hand, science fiction and fantasy have often been male-dominated. So why are romance novels dismissed as fluff, while sci-fi is seen as serious literature? The answer lies in gendered genre hierarchies. However, writers like Ursula K. Le Guin challenge this type of hierarchies, as evident in her The Left Hand of Darkness, in which Le Guin explores a society without fixed genders, questioning the very foundation of gender identity. There has been many feminist rewritings of classic genres in recent times. Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, it reworks dystopian fiction to critique patriarchal control, while we have Angela Carter's The Bloody Chamber. It reimagines fairy tales through a feminist lens. Another such example is The Palace of Illusions by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, which retells the Indian epic Mahabharata from Draupadi's perspective, highlighting her rage and agency. So these works demonstrate how genre fiction can be a tool for resistance as well as reimagination. Fourthly, gender and genre in digital and social media. With the rise of digital media, the boundaries of genre and gender representation are evolving rapidly, creating new narrative forms that challenge traditional norms. Social media has given rise to new genres, vlogs, podcasts, memes, etc., many of which challenge traditional gender norms. Platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch have given rise to hybrid genres such as comedic true crime podcasts, docu-fiction vlogs, etc., allowing creators to dismantle binary storytelling conventions. According to Jean Burgess, these digital spaces enable participatory culture, where audiences actively reshape media tropes. OTT platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus Hotstar are reshaping gendered genre conventions by diversifying narratives and audience expectations. From patriarchal tropes to queer narratives, streaming is reshaping gender and genre to a great extent. Traditionally masculine genres like crime thrillers, such as Sacred Games, now feature complex female leads, as seen in shows like Delhi Crimes, Vatika Chaturvedi, while romantic dramas such as Made in Heaven explore queer perspectives challenging heteronormative tropes. Feminist shows like Fleabag hybridize genres to center female agency, whereas Indian series like Arya, that is a crime thriller, redefines motherhood within violent narratives. The rise of OTT platforms has disrupted traditional gender genre binaries to a great extent. Fifthly, gender and genre in interactive media. Video games have historically centered on male protagonists. Early games often portrayed women as damsels and distress, for example, in Super Mario Bros. But modern games like The Last of Us Part 2 and Horizon Zero Dawn feature complex female leads who break traditional molds. Bonnie Ruberg, in Queer Game Studies, argues that gaming offers new ways of understanding gender and sexuality through play. Now that we are aware of the construction and deconstruction of gender and genre in media and studies, let us consider a few other points that are essential to this discussion. Subverting gender norms. We have already noted that the concept of gender and genre in media studies is an ever evolving concept. There have always been a tendency to structure and restructure the traditional norms and depiction of gender in various genres across different media. Therefore, it will be beneficial if we look at how some creators deliberately challenge traditional gendered genre conventions. Horror, for instance, has long followed the final girl trope where a lone female survivor outsmarts her killer. But recent films like Get Out and Hereditary complicate these patterns by weaving in social and psychological horror elements. Similarly, literature has seen feminist reworkings of classic genres by writers like Angela Carter in her reinvention of the fairy tale genre with powerful female protagonists, and also Margaret Atwood's novel The Handmaid's Tale that subverts traditional gender question by turning dystopian fiction into a critique of patriarchal oppression. These examples, and also the several others discussed so far, lead us to the fact that genre is a flexible tool, one that can both reinforce and resist societal expectations of gender. So now let us come to the section where we will discuss the emerging trends. So what does the future hold for gender and genre? As media landscapes change, so do the ways we tell and consume stories. Streaming platforms, hybrid genres, and global narratives are pushing traditional boundaries, making room for more diverse voices. Our role as critical media consumers is to question how genres shape our understanding of identity, and most importantly, how can we continue challenging outdated norms through media. Gender fluidity and post-genre media. The contemporary media landscape is witnessing a radical dissolution of traditional genre boundaries, enabling by that is enabled by streaming platforms and digital content creation. Streaming services allow hybrid genres, mixing horror with comedy, drama with sci-fi, challenging traditional gender expectations. So this post-genre shift often facilitates a more fluid representation of gender and identity. As Jason Mittel argues in Complex TV, streaming services like Netflix have created, I quote, a new narrative ecosystem where genre hybridity is the norm rather than the exception, unquote. So in a way, this genre fluidity plays an important role in challenging heteronormative storytelling structures. So let us briefly look at global perspectives on gender and genre. In the contemporary scenario, the non-Western media also challenges gender norms, as in case of Nollywood films or K-dramas that challenge class and gender hierarchies. So when we talk about gender and media, or when we talk about gender and genre, one of the important aspects is the role of audiences. So what role does the audience play in perceiving the equation of gender and genre? So audiences do play a crucial role in shaping the relationship between gender and genre. Media producers often cater to perceived audience preferences, which can reinforce gendered stereotypes. For example, the assumption that women prefer romantic stories and men prefer action-packed narratives influence what is made and how it is marketed. Audiences are dynamic participants in the construction and negotiation of gender-genre interface, and digital platforms have amplified audience agency, enabling communities to challenge gendered genre expectations collectively. For instance, social media campaigns such as call for more diverse representation in genres like fantasy and sci-fi illustrates how audiences demand narratives that reflect broader gender identities. Thus, audiences exist in constant dialogue with media industries, sometimes reinforcing traditional gender genre links, but in the contemporary times, dismantling them. As active meaning makers, they represent the most potent force for change in media representations. So as we conclude, gender and genre are deeply interconnected, shaping and reflecting cultural norms about masculinity and femininity. While many genres rely on stereotypical representations, there is also potential for creativity and resistance. The power to challenge these norms and imagine more inclusive stories lies with us, the media consumers, and of course the creators. So as we end this discussion on gender and genre, here are a few questions to ponder about. How do your favorite genres portray gender? Do they reinforce or challenge traditional norms? Can you think of a film or TV show that subverts gendered genre conventions? How does it do so? How might intersectionality like race, class, sexuality influence the representation of gender in different genres? This video has provided an overview of the dynamic relationship between gender and genre. As you continue exploring this topic, Consider how media both reflects and shapes our understanding of gender. Thank you.